My name is Kelly Rodriguez. I was 26 years old when I learned that survival can make people hate you. 3 months ago, my life was unremarkable in the best possible way. I worked as a marketing coordinator for a fast-growing tech startup in Austin, Texas. My days were spent juggling campaign deadlines, client presentations, and Slack notifications that never seemed to stop. My evenings were quiet. Takeout on the couch, a podcast humming in the background, a sense that I was finally, slowly, becoming an adult who had her footing. I lived alone in a small apartment near downtown. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Sunlight spilled through the windows every morning, and the city noise felt comforting instead of overwhelming. I liked my life. I didn't feel behind. I didn't feel like I was missing anything. My older sister Brittany felt the opposite. Brittany was 30, beautiful in a sharp, restless way, and consumed by a single idea. A 3-week luxury cruise through Greece, Italy, and the French Riviera. She talked about it constantly, at Sunday brunches, in group texts, over FaceTime calls that stretched past midnight. It wasn't just a vacation to her, it was proof. Proof that the years she spent feeling overlooked, underpaid, and underappreciated had finally added up to something extraordinary. "Kelly, you absolutely have to see these," she said one morning, sliding into the booth across from me at our parents' kitchen table, already unlocking her phone. Her voice buzzed with excitement as she shoved the screen toward my face. Crystal blue water, whitewashed buildings clinging to cliffs, champagne glasses catching the sun. 3 weeks, she said breathlessly. 3 entire weeks. Greece, Italy, Monaco, the French Riviera. I've been saving for 4 years. 4. I didn't even go to Emily's destination wedding because I needed every dollar. I smiled, genuinely happy for her. "It looks incredible, Britt. When do you leave?" 7 weeks, she said. I already paid the deposit. $6,000, non-refundable. The final payment is due in 5 weeks. Her hazel eyes shone in a way I hadn't seen since her college graduation. "This is everything I've dreamed about since I was a teenager," she said softly. Our mom looked up from the flowers she was arranging at the counter. "You deserve it, sweetheart. You've worked so hard." Dad nodded from his recliner, folding his newspaper. "Your mother's right. You earned this." I watched Brittany soak in their approval, her smile stretching wider, and felt a familiar twinge in my chest. Not jealousy exactly, more like distance. Brittany had always wanted big, visible victories. I'd learned to be proud of quieter ones. 4 weeks later, everything ended. I was driving home from a presentation meeting with a major client, still replaying the questions they'd asked, feeling cautiously optimistic. The light turned green. I pressed the gas. I never saw the truck coming. An F-150 blasted through the red light and slammed into the driver's side of my Honda Accord, with a force so violent it felt unreal. There was the screech of metal, the explosion of glass, the sensation of being thrown sideways, and then nothing. Darkness swallowed everything. I woke up 5 days later in the intensive care unit. Machines beeped around me. The air smelled sharp and chemical. My body felt heavy, disconnected, like it didn't belong to me anymore. Mom was clutching my hand, tears streaming down her face. "Baby girl," she whispered with my eyes fluttered open. "You're awake. Thank God. Thank God you're awake." My throat burned when I tried to speak. What happened? Dad appeared on the other side of the bed, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. "You were in a terrible accident, internal bleeding, 4 broken ribs, a collapsed lung." I stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the words. "You needed emergency surgery," he continued. "They had to open you up to stop the bleeding." Fear crept in slowly like ice water. Am I going to be okay? Mom squeezed my hand harder. "You will be. You'll need another surgery next week and months of physical therapy, but you're going to recover." The days blurred together after that. Doctors, nurses, pain that faded and returned in waves. My best friend Natalie showed up every afternoon without fail, sitting beside my bed, keeping me grounded. On the 7th day, she leaned closer and lowered her voice. "Your parents haven't left," she said gently. "Your dad took emergency leave. They're here constantly. I swallowed. Where's Brittany? Natalie's expression changed instantly. She hesitated, just long enough for my stomach to sink. She stopped by briefly, she said, a couple of times. Briefly. Something about that word made my chest tighten. That night, lying alone under the ICU lights, I stared at the ceiling and wondered why my survival felt like it had already cost more than my body could afford. The 8th day in the ICU felt heavier than the others, not because of the pain. By then, pain had become a constant background noise, but because something unspoken had settled into the room, an absence that felt deliberate. Brittany still hadn't come to see me while I was conscious. Not once. Natalie noticed it too. She could be busy, I said weakly, more to convince myself than her. Work, planning, everything. Natalie didn't respond right away. She pulled her chair closer to my bed, lowering herself until we were eye level. Her jaw tightened, and that was when I knew. Kelly, she said carefully, I wasn't going to tell you this. Not while you're still healing. But I don't think keeping it from you is helping anymore. My heart rate monitor beeped faster. Tell me what? I whispered. She exhaled slowly. A few days ago, I overheard your parents arguing with Brittany in the main waiting room. The room seemed to tilt. Arguing about what? Natalie's fingers curled into the fabric of her jacket. The cruise. I closed my eyes. Of course it was the cruise. She was frantic, Natalie continued. The final payment deadline is coming up fast. She kept saying she'd already paid the non-refundable deposit, that she'd lose everything if she missed the deadline. A familiar knot twisted in my stomach. And your dad told her they couldn't help her. My breath caught. Why not? Natalie didn't look away. Because they don't have the money anymore, Kelly. The words hit harder than any physical pain. All of it? I asked. She nodded. Their emergency savings, their retirement cushion, everything. Insurance covered about 60%, but your surgeries alone are expensive. The second one is $42,000 out of pocket. I felt sick. My parents had always been careful, planned, responsible. And now she's losing her dream trip because of me, I murmured. Natalie, I opened my eyes. Nat, this is not your fault, she said firmly. A drunk driver ran a red light and nearly killed you. Your parents didn't choose between you and a vacation. They chose between you and a funeral. Tears blurred my vision anyway. How did she react? I asked quietly. Natalie hesitated, then sighed. She said some awful things. My chest tightened. Like what? She said it wasn't fair, that you ruined everything she'd worked toward for 4 years, that she'd been planning this trip since before you even got your current job. My fingers trembled against the hospital sheets. And then, Natalie continued, her voice dropping, she said something that made your mom cry. What? She said it was your fault for not knowing how to drive properly, that if you'd just been more careful, none of this would have happened. Silence swallowed the room. What did my dad say? I whispered. He lost it, Natalie said. Told her to leave. Said she wasn't welcome at the hospital if she couldn't show basic human decency. I stared at the ceiling, trying to reconcile the sister I grew up with, the one who taught me how to braid my hair, who used to sneak me candy when our parents weren't looking, with the woman Natalie was describing. That night I couldn't sleep. Every beep of the machines made me flinch. Every shadow felt too dark, too close. Sometime after midnight, the medication finally pulled me under. I don't know what woke me. Maybe instinct. Maybe fear. I felt pressure, subtle, deliberate, near my face. My oxygen tube shifted slightly, tugging against my skin. My eyes fluttered open. A figure stood beside my bed, silhouetted against the faint hallway light. Britt, I mumbled, barely conscious. The figure froze, then moved away. Fast. Too fast. The next morning, my nurse Sandra frowned as she checked my vitals. Did you have any trouble breathing last night? She asked. I don't think so, I said slowly. Why? Your oxygen saturation dropped dangerously low around 215, she said. It was close, really close. A chill slid down my spine. I thought maybe I felt something weird, I admitted, but I was so out of it. Sandra's mouth tightened. That shouldn't happen with functioning equipment. I'm having maintenance check everything. That afternoon, Natalie returned, pale, shaken. We need to talk, she said, closing the door behind her. What happened? I asked. I ran into Brittany in the parking garage this morning, she said. She didn't see me. She was on the phone. My heart pounded. What was she saying? Natalie swallowed hard. She said that if you hadn't made it through the night, your parents would have had the money for her cruise. The room went cold. She said, and I'm quoting her exactly, "It would have solved everything." I felt like I couldn't breathe. Natalie leaned closer. Kelly, did someone touch your oxygen line last night? I told Sandra everything. Hospital security treated it seriously. Cameras were reviewed, access logs pulled. The next day, Detective Sarah Brennan arrived. She was calm, focused. Her gray eyes missed nothing. The footage shows your sister entering your room at 1:43 a.m., she said gently. She exited at 1:57. 9 minutes later, your oxygen levels dropped to critical. She tried to kill me, I whispered. We're investigating attempted homicide, she said evenly. When my parents were questioned, they looked destroyed. She said we always chose Kelly over her, Mom sobbed. She said we were punishing her. And then, Dad added quietly, she said, "Don't be surprised if I handle this my own way." The evidence was piling up, but it wasn't enough. It's circumstantial, Detective Brennan admitted later. We need intent, direct admission. Natalie squeezed my hand. Then we get her to talk. How? She thinks she's right, Natalie said. People like that always do. 2 days later, they arranged the meeting. A hospital conference room, recording equipment hidden. Detective Brennan listening from next door. When Brittany walked in, I barely recognized her. Her face was hard, cold. "What do you want, Kelly?" she snapped. I met her gaze. "I want to know why you tried to kill me." She laughed, sharp and bitter. "You're paranoid. The cameras don't lie. I came to check on you. At 2 a.m? Her smile faltered. "You were worried about your cruise money," I said quietly. "You said my death would have solved everything." Her face flushed. "You ruined my life," she hissed. "Everything I worked for. And that justified killing me?" "I didn't—" She stopped herself. "You didn't what?" Her eyes narrowed. "You can't prove anything," she said smugly. "Maybe," I replied, "but you just confessed." The door opened. Detective Brennan stepped inside. "Brittany Rodriguez," she said calmly. "You're under arrest for attempted murder." Brittany's face drained of color. "This isn't over," she spat as she was cuffed. It was. The arrest didn't feel real at first. Even after Brittany was escorted out of the conference room in handcuffs. Even after Detective Brennan followed her, calmly reciting rights like she was reading a grocery list. My mind refused to catch up. I just sat there in my wheelchair, hands shaking in my lap, staring at the empty chair where my sister had been standing minutes earlier. "She really said it," I whispered. Natalie crouched in front of me, gripping my hands tightly. "She didn't just say it, Kelly. She justified it. That matters." I nodded, but my chest felt hollow. Detective Brennan returned a few minutes later, her expression professional, but not unkind. "You did well," she said. "I know that wasn't easy." "I didn't plan to bait her," I said hoarsely. "I just wanted her to tell the truth." "She did," Brennan replied. "And she did it because she believed she was right." That was the part that terrified me most. Brittany hadn't confessed in a moment of weakness or panic. She'd confessed out of certainty, out of entitlement. She truly believed my life was negotiable. The next few days passed in a strange limbo. Word traveled fast through the hospital. Staff members who had cared for me now looked at me with a new mix of sympathy and vigilance. Security presence increased on the floor. My parents barely left my side. Mom cried constantly, quiet, exhausted tears that seemed to drain her of color. "I keep replaying everything," she said one evening, sitting beside my bed. "Every argument, every time she said we favored you. I should have seen this coming." "You couldn't have," I said gently. "None of us could." Dad stood near the window, arms crossed, staring out at the parking lot. "She wasn't like this," he said quietly. "Not always." "No," Natalie said softly, "but resentment doesn't appear overnight. It grows." Detective Brennan kept us informed. Brittany had refused to speak to police without a lawyer. A restraining order was granted immediately. The DA's office filed formal charges for attempted murder and criminal threats. It's going to be a fight, Brennan warned. Her defense will argue emotional distress, financial pressure, family conflict. But she tampered with medical equipment, I said. Yes, Brennan agreed, and she admitted intent. That's critical. I was discharged from the ICU a week later and moved to a regular hospital room. Physically, I was healing. Emotionally, I was unraveling. Every time a nurse adjusted my oxygen or checked my IV, my body tensed. Sleep came in short, broken bursts. I dreamed of hands reaching toward my face, of voices whispering calculations instead of comfort. Natalie stayed with me whenever she could. You're safe, she reminded me constantly. She can't touch you. I nodded, but safety felt fragile now, conditional. The trial began 3 months later. By then, I was walking with assistance, my ribs still aching, my lungs still weaker than it used to be. I sat in the courtroom every day, flanked by my parents, Natalie behind us like a quiet wall of support. Brittany sat at the defense table, perfectly composed, her hair neatly styled, her expression carefully neutral. She didn't look at me once. Her attorney, Richard Thornton, was polished and confident. He painted a picture of a woman pushed past her breaking point. She was under extreme emotional distress, he told the jury. Her parents' savings, money she had believed might help her achieve a lifelong dream, vanished overnight. She reacted poorly, yes, but not criminally. The prosecutor, Victoria Lawson, dismantled that narrative piece by piece. This was not a spontaneous outburst, she said. This was planning, timing, access, opportunity. She played the security footage. She played the recording from the conference room. She let Brittany's own words hang in the air. It would have solved everything. When Brittany took the stand, she tried to cry. She spoke about pressure, about feeling invisible, about always being second. But when Victoria Lawson asked her one simple question, "Did you believe your sister's death would benefit you financially?" Brittany hesitated. Too long. "Yes," she said finally. "I did." The courtroom went silent. The jury deliberated for 7 hours. When they returned, my heart hammered so loudly I could barely hear the verdict. "Guilty on all counts," Brittany screamed. At sentencing, the judge didn't waver. "You attempted to murder a critically injured family member out of greed and entitlement," Judge Montgomery said coldly. "You showed no remorse, only justification." 18 years. No parole for 12. Brittany looked at me then. Her eyes weren't apologetic. They were furious. Afterward, my parents held me in the hallway outside the courtroom. "We're so sorry," Mom sobbed. "We failed her. We failed you." "No," I said firmly. "You chose me. You chose my life." That mattered. Healing didn't come all at once. It came slowly. Physical therapy, trauma therapy, long conversations that ended in silence instead of answers. One day, 7 months after sentencing, a letter arrived from the prison. Natalie read it first. "She wants forgiveness," she said flatly. "She says families should move on." I tore the letter up without opening it. "I'm not interested in forgiveness," I said. "I'm interested in living." Now, 14 months later, I'm still here, stronger, wiser, alive. Some people believe family means unconditional forgiveness. I believe family means protecting the people who truly love you, even if that means cutting someone out forever. I thought the arrest would be the hardest part. I was wrong. The waiting was worse. Between Brittany's arrest and the trial, life moved in an uncanny, distorted rhythm. Like the world had decided to keep spinning while my body and mind lagged several steps behind. Days were filled with doctor appointments, physical therapy sessions, and paperwork that seemed endless. Nights were the hardest. Silence magnified everything. Every creak in my apartment made me flinch. Every unexpected phone notification sent a jolt through my chest. The restraining order helped on paper. Emotionally, it did very little. "She can't reach you," Natalie reminded me one evening as we sat on my couch, my leg propped up on pillows. "She's locked up. She has no access. I know, I said, but she already crossed a line most people never even think about. Natalie nodded slowly. That kind of betrayal doesn't fade quickly. My parents tried to be strong, but grief carved deep lines into them. Mom jumped whenever the phone rang. Dad lost weight without noticing. Sometimes I'd catch them whispering late at night, voices hushed, like speaking louder might make reality solidify again. She was our child too, Mom said once, tears streaking down her face. How did we raise someone capable of this? You didn't raise her to do this, I replied gently. She chose it. But even as I said it, I understood the guilt that clung to them. Parents aren't wired to separate love from responsibility easily. The trial date finally arrived 5 months after my arrest. Walking into the courthouse felt surreal. I was stronger physically by then, no wheelchair, no oxygen tube, but my body still betrayed me when nerves surged. My ribs ached under stress, my hands shook. The courtroom was cold and impersonal. Wood benches, neutral walls, a place designed to strip emotion down to facts. Brittany sat at the defense table, impeccably dressed. Her posture was straight, her expression calm. Too calm. She didn't look at me when I entered, not once. Her attorney, Richard Thornton, spoke first. He told the jury a story about pressure, about disappointment, about a woman who had momentarily lost perspective under unbearable stress. She never intended to kill her sister, he said smoothly. This was a misunderstanding fueled by grief and resentment, not criminal intent. I watched the jurors' faces carefully. Some looked skeptical, others uncertain. Then the prosecution began. Victoria Lawson didn't raise her voice. She didn't dramatize. She didn't need to. She laid out the timeline with surgical precision. The cruise deposit, the payment deadline, the hospital visitor access card, the late night entry, the oxygen drop, the recorded confession. This was not an accident, Victoria said calmly. It was a calculated act based on perceived financial gain. When the security footage played, the courtroom held its breath. There was Brittany, entering my ICU room, leaning toward my equipment, staying far longer than concern would require. Then came the audio recording from the conference room. Her voice filled the courtroom. You ruined my life. It would have been peaceful. It would have solved everything. I felt my mother stiffen beside me. Brittany's jaw clenched, but she still didn't look at me. When she took the stand, she tried a different approach. She cried. She talked about feeling overshadowed, about believing she'd always come second, about dreaming of something beautiful and watching it disappear. I wasn't thinking clearly, she said. I was angry, hurt. I didn't mean any of it. Victoria Lawson stood. One question, she said. Did you believe your sister's death would allow you to receive financial assistance for your cruise? Brittany hesitated. It was barely noticeable, a fraction of a second, but it was enough. Yes, she said finally. The courtroom went silent. That single word cut through every excuse. The jury deliberated for hours that felt endless. I stared at the floor. Natalie squeezed my hand. My parents sat rigid, bracing for a verdict that felt impossible, no matter which way it landed. When the jury returned, I couldn't breathe. Guilty on all counts, Brittany screamed. Not in grief, in rage. At sentencing, the judge didn't soften her tone. You attempted to murder your sister, a critically injured patient, out of entitlement, she said. You showed no remorse and issued continued threats. 18 years. No parole for 12. As Brittany was led away, she finally looked at me. There was no apology in her eyes, only hatred. That was when I understood something crucial. This had never been about me. But the verdict was for me. The sentencing ended, but the aftermath lingered like smoke. For weeks, my body moved on autopilot. Wake up, physical therapy, paperwork, therapy sessions where I talked until my throat hurt and then sat in silence, staring at the carpet, while my therapist waited patiently for the words I couldn't find yet. People kept asking how I felt. Relieved, broken, vindicated, ashamed. Sometimes all at once. Brittany's conviction made headlines for a few days. Sister attempts murder over vacation dispute. Strangers offered opinions in comment sections I never read. Some called her evil. Others blamed stress. A few, disturbingly, suggested that family conflicts can push people too far. I stopped reading everything. The only opinions that mattered lived inside my own head, and even those were hard to sit with. My parents struggled in different ways. Mom woke up crying some mornings, convinced she'd hear Brittany's footsteps in the hallway like she used to. Dad grew quieter, retreating into routines, fixing things around the house that didn't need fixing. She was our daughter, he said one evening, staring at his hands. No matter what she did. I know, I replied softly, but she still chose to hurt me. That truth didn't cancel their grief. It just existed alongside it. 6 weeks after the sentencing, Brittany's lawyer contacted Detective Brennan. She's requesting a meeting, Brennan told me over the phone. She says she wants to apologize. My chest tightened instantly. No. She claims she's remorseful. No, I repeated. I'm not seeing her. Ever. You're not obligated to, Brennan said. I wanted to make sure your wishes were clear. They are, I said firmly. She doesn't get access to me anymore. Natalie was sitting across from me on the couch, watching my face. She tried to kill you, she said flatly. You don't owe her forgiveness. A week later, a handwritten letter arrived. From prison. Natalie intercepted it before I could even touch the envelope. I'll read it first, she said gently. I watched her eyes move across the page. Her expression didn't change, but her jaw tightened. She says she was overwhelmed, Natalie summarized. She says she didn't mean it. She says family should forgive family. I held out my hand. She hesitated. Are you sure you want it? No, I said. I don't. I took the envelope anyway, unopened, and tore it into thin strips, then smaller ones, until the words inside were nothing but confetti. Natalie nodded. Good. That felt like a turning point. Not closure, but clarity. I wasn't responsible for repairing what Brittany broke. Recovery wasn't dramatic after that. It was quiet, methodical. I returned to work part-time at first, easing back into projects, relearning how to trust my body under stress. I finished 6 months of physical therapy. I kept going to trauma counseling, even on weeks when I felt fine, because fine turned out to be fragile. My relationship with my parents shifted. We had dinners together now, just the three of us. No tension, no competing narratives, just honesty. Sometimes there was laughter, sometimes silence. Both were allowed. One Sunday afternoon, Mom asked the question I knew had been sitting on her chest for months. Do you think you'll ever forgive her? I didn't answer immediately. I thought about the ICU lights, the oxygen alarm, the word solved echoing in my head. No, I said finally, and I don't think I should have to. Dad nodded slowly. That's fair. I forgive myself, I added quietly, for surviving, for costing money, for taking up space. Mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You were never a burden. 14 months have passed since that night in the ICU. I'm 27 now. I have my life back. Not the one I had before, but a stronger one, a clearer one. Brittany is in prison, where she can't hurt me or anyone else. I don't track her appeals. I don't wonder how she's doing. That chapter is closed. Some people believe family means unconditional forgiveness. I don't. I believe family means protecting the people who choose your life, and sometimes that means walking away from the ones who don't. If you were in my place, what would you have done?